This is a Global Skills Podcast, conversations that shape the future of work and learning. We're exploring how we close the skills gap and build a future where everyone has the chance to thrive. From education to business, connecting people, ideas, and opportunities that drive change. It's about collaboration, curiosity, and creating real impact today. Because every skill learned brings us one step closer to a more inclusive world. The Global Skills Podcast, where learning and opportunity come together. Welcome to the Global Skills Podcast. Today's guest is Jon Allen, Head of Learning, Innovation and Research at the British Parking Association. With over 18 years' experience across international education, commercial management, and public sector innovation, he's led major partnerships, shaped national programs, including the National Parking Platform, and continues to drive progress in EV infrastructure and parking leadership. He's also fluent in Brazilian Portuguese. So you're very welcome to the podcast, Jon. Great to have you.
Thank you. Wow. Read that out to my mum as well. That sounds brilliant.
Well, you know what, if I may, because I don't get many people from the UK coming on and they can speak Brazilian Portuguese, could I maybe start there and say, how do you have those languages? And then also, what brought you to the career path that has led you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I guess it started when I was quite young. I was living in London and I was in my early 20s and I was attempting to be an actor of all things. And I say attempting with a very strong word. And I decided that I wanted to travel the world, etc., etc. And this is going to sound like I've made this up, but I had just finished a contract at a job. I was between jobs and I was walking along near the embankment in London and I had about £20 left in my name. And I walked past this stand in the embankment, one of those sort of newsstands. And I looked for all sorts of jobs. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to learn cultures and just find myself, as it were, because I was a little bit disillusioned with acting. I was doing events organizing and stuff for charitable organizations, which was very good, but wasn't what I wanted to do. I looked at the Time Out magazine, and back then, in the early 1800s, there wasn't any real internet had just got started. Time Out magazine was the magazine where you could find opportunities and things like that. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to spend half the money I have to my name right now on this magazine. I've got a feeling if I don't do it, I will not find the opportunity that will change my life. It was a really strange moment. So I decided to take the magazine, and there was an advert in the magazine to live and work in Brazil and to teach theatre. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is so me. So I actually jumped on the underground and went to see the people on the address and said, I phoned them up, said, look, I want to come see you. I've seen this opportunity. This is my opportunity. And they said, oh, that's all very nice. That's all very charming, fantastic. But you're going to have to write a 3,000 word proposal of what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. So I did. I wrote this 3,000 word proposal. How I was going to teach theatre in Brazil and English to underprivileged kids. And I got the scholarship to go to Brazil to teach English. I trained as an English language teacher over there, did my TEFL certification, etc. And then I became an English language teacher. That's how I started. And then I met my wife. I started teaching English and theatre. I was supposed to do 1 year in the theatre project. I ended up doing 2 because I liked it so much. And then lived in Chile. And then by that time we had a family. So that's how I speak Brazilian Portuguese. I'm trying to teach theatre to Brazilians who don't speak any English. It's not easy. So you have to learn quite quickly.
And language, I imagine.
Yeah.
Before we jump into your career, because I'm kind of intrigued about that idea of like getting that instinct to go spend half your money and buy a magazine. And the reason I want to hone in on it is I think a lot of people at the moment are feeling very lost, especially looking for jobs, and money is a huge strain. What advice would you give them about, because we all have instincts and they're very strong when we're young, I believe. And then I remember giving talks years ago and I can't remember the exact stats. So please feel free to correct me if you go Google this, but it was something like by the time we're 18, we've heard the word no 80,000 times. So you just start to disconnect with yourself, but clearly you were still connected enough to act. What advice would you have for people right now in that predicament of, oh my God, I have the financial stress, and maybe they're not connecting with their instinct?
I would say that at that very moment, I think what I take from that is invest in yourself, because really what that was I had an idea and I wanted to do it and I did it. I didn't have much money, and it doesn't sound like a lot, £10, but you've got £20 in your pocket. That's a lot. Invest in yourself and don't be afraid to go abroad as well if you have to, or do something out of your comfort zone, because I think it defined me as a professional. but investing in myself. So it wasn't like I jumped on a plane and went, I'm going to have a job. It was, I'm going to find a job. I'm going to get myself sorted. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to write this scholarship, but just invest in yourself, because if you invest in yourself, people buy into you. I think I got that position because people saw my passion and they saw what I wanted to do. I think hearing no, if you're an unsuccessful young actor or somebody like that in London, then that really hits you. So I was completely lost because my entire childhood I dreamed of being an actor, and I've done all sorts of plays and short films and stuff in my hometown. But then I went to London and I was suddenly this, well, just this nobody. And the great thing about going overseas was that nobody knows you as well.
Reinvent yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely an experience I would recommend to any young person, is to go overseas for a little while, but don't just go overseas. Try and find an opportunity, broaden your horizons, because if you're just in one place, you can get knocked down a lot. I think London was really good for me as well as a young person, because it did give me a good job in I work for a charitable events organizer. They basically do all the parachute jumps for charity, right? So that was a great job. For me, that was a great job. And so go where the opportunities are. Don't be afraid, I'd say.
And the other piece I think that stands out is as soon as you saw the ad, you took action and you got yourself in front of them. And I know it's more difficult these days, but I think a lot of maybe people that are not working or early talent, they're just thinking, well, I'll click and apply. But the connection you make with someone, even if it's like this, we're on Zoom, it's beyond an email. And look what it led to. So after your experience, you came back to the UK, but you came back with the whole family.
Yeah. And I had to reinvent myself again. And that's even harder. By that time, I was in my kind of early 20s, early to mid 20s. And I wanted to come back and teach English. And my family, my parents are based in Somerset, in quite a small village in the middle of nowhere. It's famous for flooding every year. So there weren't a lot of opportunities there. I remember going to Bristol and having an interview there for an English school. And the guy said, well, I can find you maybe 3 months work in the summer, but I can't really find you any other work. And then you have to reinvent yourself again. And I remember walking into a recruiter's office, having gone for an interview for some insurance company or something, and only to find out that the role that I'd applied for, they'd messed up, but it was another role. So I was fully suited and booted. So I just walked into a recruitment agency, and the lady said, do you want to be a recruitment consultant? And I was like, never heard of it. So I actually ended up going from being a TEFL teacher, doing teaching theatre and English in Brazil, to being an IT recruitment consultant. So I had to reinvent myself again. And so I think that's another important thing in life now. You have to reinvent yourself all the time. And I think what you said is really important. You have to talk to people. You have to make connections with people. You have to get in front of people, because it makes a massive difference. And when I was a recruiter, that's basically what I did. I made connections with people on behalf of other people who were just clicking online. And I spent a lot of time with them on the phone and understanding who they were and what made them tick. It wasn't about the CV, because a lot of them had similar qualifications. It was about the personalities and the working cultures and getting to know them and stuff. And I ended up putting people into sort of jobs in BBC and all sorts of places. It was very fun. Sort of top developers that developed the BBC websites, all that kind of stuff. So, but I had to reinvent myself again. Yeah. I think young people are starting to get that now, that they have to reinvent themselves a lot. And it's okay if you're not sure what you want to do. And I think you have to adapt yourself and go in with an open mind.
That's it. It's okay to not know what you want to do, because if you ask, if they've done surveys with working professionals, and we'll just say the average age is 30s, 40s, 50s, something like 7 and 10 are actually not very happy with the path that they chose. And that's because, I don't know if you have the same experience, but you're nearly forced at a very young age to try and identify your path. And that today that's changing because of AI. The world is very much changing. So having that agility, but the one thing I've noticed in everything you've said so far, and you're not the first actor. I don't know if you describe yourself as actor, former
No,
actor.
you have to describe yourself as an actor. It usually means you're not one.
Well, you're not the first one to come in and be really successful in talent acquisition and talent management learning, because you're able to connect with people and you get people. And so you were connecting with people teaching, you came to recruitment again. So you're now in a position, maybe you could tell me about your current position and the skills that you've brought through from recruitment into the role that you're in now.
Again, it was another curious moment, because I started my role at the BPA during COVID, right? And that was a kind of another reset moment for a lot of people. I was in international education, and COVID devastated the sector. And I just popped my CV online, and then someone phoned me up and said, a recruiter again, and said, "Oh, are you interested in working for the British Parking Association?" And I kind of laughed at her, sort of said, "Well, I think you've got the wrong guy." But when I went through it, she sort of went through my experience and my skills, and she said, "No, that's what we're looking for." So I guess what I bring to the role is, obviously I've got a background in training and explaining things. So a lot of what I do is explaining quite dry technical jargon to our members, legislation, and trying to connect people with those kind of subjects. And I'm very much a kind of a cat herder. So it's about understanding people, getting people together to produce guidance documents, to produce training materials. It's all done with experts. So a lot of what I do is relationship building. And I think nowadays in the workplace, it's very much skills focused. It's about needing to understand how to do something. And our sector, it's people probably think about the parking sector and think, well, it's what's there to learn, but it's such a complex ecosystem. You've got tech companies, you're dealing with enforcement companies on the ground, but they have AI cameras, they have all sorts of software that sits behind the industry. And there's actually, and then it also touches on things like electric vehicles and all sorts of things. So I think that's probably one of the skills I bring from recruitment is understanding. You learn to understand what people can bring to a situation and how they would fit in with the situation. And a big part of what I do is trying to professionalize parking sector and to create pathways for professionals.
This is a really good leading point around pathways, because we were touching on this before about there's a stereotype for your industry, a bit like STEM, where it attracts the same type of person. And yet we're in a world now where we need to extend that and expand that so it's more diverse, more inclusive. But that piece that you're talking about of skills and career pathways and young people or mid career that have never considered this as an industry, understanding what skills are transferable and could be acquired in the industry. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and if there's an example of maybe someone who progressed up through the industry and is in a role that might surprise listeners.
Yeah, there's a very good example of one of our former presidents of the association. I mean, the British Park Association is a not-for-profit association. We have about 800 corporate members. We're run by our members. So we have sort of a president, we have a board, an elected council. So it's quite a prestigious role within the sector. But this individual started, I think, when they were sort of 17 or 18. I think they wanted to be in the armed forces and things like that. They ended up becoming a civil enforcement officer or a traffic warden, as they used to be known as. And during their career, they worked their way up through different roles in the organization. And now they're kind of a global head of sales and marketing, a major global company based in the States. And they also became a president of one of the 2 or 3 women presidents of the British Parking Association. So a lot of people would look at that job and look at people going around checking cars and things and just think that's all it is to the job or that's all they'll ever do. But there are so many opportunities in the industry for that career progression, and I don't think people realize it. So one of the really important things that we do is look for pathways for professionals and let them understand that there is a way to progress and to become certified parking professionals. So there's a lot more to the job than people think as well.
And if that doesn't change, if, for example, organizations or even the BPA don't start making changes to really showing and demonstrating skills to career pathways, what would you predict would happen if nothing changes?
Well, I think what would happen is that the industry would stall and it would sort of create fossilized errors. What we realized was across the industry, there was a lot of sporadic, inconsistent training for professionals. And some of it was just informal. It was like, you're a big strapping lad, you can do this job. If anyone gives you any grief, just tell them where to go or whatever, or other words to that effect. Just get on with it. Doesn't matter if people are shouting at you in the street. That's just part of the job. Man up and all that kind of stuff. And that's your supervisor telling you that. And then so what happens is people that do stay are probably not fit for the job because they give the wrong impression. And the right people for the job will leave. And so you end up with this continuous cycle of people coming in and coming out of the profession, and it gives it a bad reputation. Whereas there is a lot of really good training out there, a lot of really good nuanced training by real experts on, because if you're a civil enforcement officer, you're dealing with people with dementia that may have forgotten where they are. They might be confused. You're dealing with vulnerable members of the public. I mean, there are all sorts of great initiatives out there, like Ask Angela and things that have been enacted by civil enforcement officers to help women in need if they're distressed. There's a lot of things that they do that actually protect vulnerable, and especially with blue badge enforcement, making sure that the blue badge holders can actually park near where they want to park, and having to deal with aggressive members of the public that have stolen badges or are blocking people in. So it's about making people realize there are a lot of people skills involved. Conflict management is a big one. And then also dealing with incidents. How do you deal with a team member that's been verbally, physically abused, and racially abused? So yeah, there's a lot more to it than just giving people parking tickets. It's about managing your environment.
Quick question. Do you actually know what skills exist across your organizations today? Or are decisions still being made on job titles, CVs, and assumptions around who can be reskilled and upskilled? You see, as AI reshapes work and organizations really face that pressure to cut costs, the real challenge isn't just skills gaps. It's understanding which skills are transferable and which can be redeployed into the future with a bit of upskilling. So, for the listeners of Global Skills Podcast, Abodu, our sponsor, has created this free Skills AI readiness assessment. It gives leaders clarity in just 3 minutes. It shows skills gaps, automation exposure, and where future-ready capabilities already exist within your business. No data upload, no preparation, just clarity for the future of your organization. Visit abodu.com/global skills podcast. Now, back to the episode.
And how important is this industry to economies? Has anyone sort of done that analysis? Because naively, I didn't really give it much thought. But as you were saying, this transport, parking, and I think there was a third area that you were saying encompasses this sector. How important is it to the economies for governments?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, if you look at the tech sector alone, I mean, if you look at most governments across Europe investing very heavily in tech. So the parking industry is a multi-billion pound industry, but it's not just about parking tickets. It's about tech software that comes off of it. So your parking apps, right down to back office systems for reconciling money and to camera technology. So if you add all those up, I mean, it's essential to the economy. It's not just about people issuing parking tickets. It's a lot more to that. There's a whole ecosystem involved in parking. There's somebody that goes out and measures all the lines on a road. That's their full-time job, and works out different regulations around different parking bays and whether the lines. And so there's so many things, so many nuances to it. And then you've got the EV sector that also traverses the parking sector. So the EV industry is huge now.
There's a big skills gap in EV from conversations that I've had around the forecast. Well, I mean, we'll talk about the UK, for example, in terms of the number of people that are going to be employed in EV by 2030 and the skill set that's in the economy right now. There's this huge gap. Are you seeing any proactive moves by suppliers or trainers within the UK to help fill that gap?
Yeah, and it's starting with the government have put some funding in through the Department for Transport in England anyway, who are very fond of Lord of the Rings quotes. They started something called AUX funding, which was it was really for on-street residential charging scheme. They've then now expanded that. And that was about leveling things up for the public, because a massive chunk, almost half of the population, don't have their own driveway, for example. So how do you marry that with making sure there's an equitable charging infrastructure across the UK? So that's where that came from. But now they've kind of branched out to something called the Levi scheme. So they actually did abandon Lord of the Rings quotes, but they just didn't want to call it levy because it sounds like a tax. But the Levi funding, which was about having these bigger joined up projects of EV infrastructure, but again, very much on street leveling up. And part of that funding was to have, so local authorities can apply for consultants or specialists that can come into their organizations and to help them with the infrastructure. We have seen some members like Cenex and Energy Saving Trust. They've put together some training programs, especially Cenex, for EV professionals. And you've got some partnerships with some local authorities and universities that are starting to look at it. But you're right, it's a massive gap. And there are all sorts of skills gaps, sort of traffic regulation orders, which most people probably never heard of, but they're basically the regulations that sit behind parking bays. It takes 6 months to put one in. A very complicated legal process where you have to invite members of the public to consult before you do anything. Everything is done with consultation. So, but yeah, you're right. The EV skills gap is huge, and it's a big part of what we do. You know, we have a group in BPA called EV Connect, which is about linking our EV members, the guys that operate and install EV charge points with our parking professionals, because there are all sorts of new things that are coming out. Every new solution creates a whole new set of problems. So if you think about enforcing a bay, there are also myriad of different rules and regulations around different bays, and it's complicated enough for drivers, right? Then if you add in EV and you add in things like someone with a blue badge as well, then it gets even more complicated. And how do you enforce it? If someone's a disabled driver in an ICE vehicle, as we call it, a combustion engine vehicle, do they have the right to park in an EV disabled bay or not?
Considerations. And I think as well, what you're saying is there's some suppliers trying to address microcosm elements of, say, even the EV skills gap, but no one is taking, say, a UK wide view of what's our supply and demand around talent, skills, how are we going to put a strategy in place. And we have a guest coming on in a couple of weeks who will be talking about air traffic controllers, and there's a major global shortage, but it was predicted 20, 30 years ago through data points. And it's like, how do we analyze data to ensure what we know will be automated with AI within transport, and then what skills are humans going to need? And how can we get ahead of it instead of, it feels like, and it's not just this industry, but so many industries I'm getting to talk to guests on, it's nearly this knee-jerk reaction to, we have a gap. So it's quite a broad question, but if you could wave a magic wand on your industry, what would you like to see happen? Just one or two things of, right, magic wand, it's unlimited what I can do. This is what I'd love to see happen.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what I'd like to do is see a professional framework across the sector. I mean, we've got one in parking, but there's a long way to go with it. But that to be a comprehensive framework for different skills. Tech skills are so important now with the new world. Project management skills, and a lot of the EV is about project management, and it's also about relationship management. There's multiple different stakeholders you have to deal with. It's about understanding how to put together bids, how to reply to bids, one end or the other. It would be nice to have a comprehensive framework across the parking sector, certified parking professionals. That's what we're working at the moment, so that we've already started doing that. So being a certified parking transport professional, being a certified EV infrastructure professional, and attracting talent to that, because and recognizing the talent and celebrating it, because it is really important. You know, you look at marketing professionals and you look at sales professionals, they have very clear pathways and they have some fantastic frameworks. And the BPA that's what we're really focused on. We've started it with City and Guilds certification, which is fantastic. But also there's all sorts of skills that traverse different industries as well. So team leader skills and management skills are so important as well. I think you can get too focused on those kind of abilities or situations or scenarios, and then you always forget about managers and team leaders. And it's probably the least kind of focused on in terms of industries. Or we need a load of tech people. We need loads of people in STEM. There are so many factors to management that can make your team stay or make your company proactive or productive, such as understanding neurotypical people against people in different spectrums, and how simply communicating with them in the right way can bring the best out of them. And being disorganized with your communication can really, really trigger them. And there's not much awareness of that.
We have a wonderful guest in a couple of weeks coming on to talk about that very subject, and how, we're at a point now today that a lot of people have been diagnosed where maybe 20, 30 years ago, there was no diagnosis. But work culture and companies, we have a way to go in terms of acknowledging how we need to change. But everyone has potential. But if we can adjust how we structure our management, communication, training, development, I mean, you can supercharge a company. I have a closing tradition to the podcast where I ask two questions, but you only have to answer one of these. First question is, have you a skill that you were using when you were younger that you don't really use anymore, but you'd like to start reusing, and why? Or if you were to give advice to young people, or maybe someone mid-career who's just been made redundant, as to the skills that you think are important, or skill that you think is important to just give you a bit of an edge today?
Well, I can't think of any skills that I had when I was younger that I don't use now, because I think you're essentially the same person, but you just hone those skills and you grow confidence in them and you learn which ones define you. And I think that probably answers the second question as well. I think people, when they get made redundant, and I've been made redundant maybe 3 times in my life at major times. And the first time it's like the carpet's been pulled from under you. And I think the first mistake you do is you go straight on to LinkedIn or whatever it is, and you start looking at similar jobs because you think you're typecast. And of course, that's a natural reaction. and that's fine. But I've always found when I've been made redundant, it's when I really focus on my CV and when I focused on my experiences and those sort of skills. So the skills are building relationships, creating things that maybe you might not realize. If you've been in an organization and you've set up a product, a service, you've been in a creative process. So you've created things. What have you created since you in your career? What have you made happen? What have you realized? And I think people are interested in those kind of things, those kind of outputs. What outputs have you done? So I think you need to focus on your skills. And yeah, for me, I'd be saying, relationship management, stakeholder management's been a big part, building relationships with people. And that means building trust. And that shows that you're somebody that's honest, that someone that's diligent. So I would say best thing you can do if you're maybe done is to really focus on those and look at yourself and look into what you did in your last role, what you achieved, and what does that mean? What skills does that relate to? And focus on that. And then put your CV everywhere in the ether and see what the universe brings back as well. And the other piece of advice I'd give to anyone that's been made redundant is you're probably going to have about 4 or 5 interviews afterwards, or you're going to get to a final interview and you're going to be turned down because somebody else has got slightly more experience than you or is better qualified. And I'd say to them that every single one of those times that that's happened to me, it's always been for the right reason. And it's led me to the job I'm in now, which I love. So,
John, the advice has been just amazing. Like, I think you're touching on the magic of skills, and maybe it's going beyond like what we learn in college. These are your hard skills. These are your soft skills. It's really know yourself and being able to tell the stories, like you said, of the person that started at 17 and who's gone on to be a president and now global head. And I just feel very inspired. And hopefully people who are listening today, whether you're a leader, heading up learning, contact acquisition, I mean, you've ticked a lot of boxes, John. Or your early talent, or you've just been made redundant. Hopefully you've just got something from today. So just thank you so much. I really appreciate coming on as a guest.
well, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Whether you're leading a business, shaping education, planning your next career move, or just starting out, you're part of a global conversation about how we learn, work, and grow. If you've enjoyed this episode, tap subscribe so you never miss the latest insights. And if you have a moment, leaving a quick rating really helps people find the show. For early access to new episodes, event invitations, and the chance to connect with others driving real change, join the community at globalskillspodcast.com. The future of skills belongs to all of us. Proudly sponsored by Abodu, empowering organisations and educators with world-class skills technology to build a better future for everyone.